First, we're going to hear from YB Ramkapal Singh to give his keynote address. Then we'll have a short photo session before, and after that, we will hear from Melati, Dr. Melati, to present the lecture for today. And after the intermission, we'll have a panel discussion, right, which will be led by our moderator and our senior research associate, Rachel De Cruz. And then we will have a closing from Datuk Mariati Robert. And of course, I think some of you would have anticipated, and if you have not registered, please remember to get yourself registered. We are going to be screening the Abang Adik movie, which came out at a very opportune time at GSC News Central at 3 p.m. Right? So for this one, we will be giving out the tickets after the session. So please do stay all the way to the end. And because this is a special screening, so I know sometimes movies they will always have advertisements. So there's no advertisement, so it will start at 3 p.m. sharp. So please be there seated by 2:45. If you are late, you're not gonna watch the movie. And we are also very privileged to have invited the director of the movie, Jin, who will be joining us until from like 5 to 5:30. Yeah. So yes. So that's the short schedule for today. All right. So without further ado, I would like to invite, to kick off our session today, YB Tuan Ramkapal Singh to provide his keynote address.
Okay. So
yes.
Do it from over there. Can I use this?
Yeah.
Good morning, and my apologies. I need a bit of a higher table because my eyesight isn't as good as it was before. But thank you very much for having me this morning. It's a great pleasure and a privilege for me to stand here before all of you in this very beautiful building, I must say, because it's the first time I'm coming here. First and foremost, Yang Berbahagia Dato' Mariati Robert, Commissioner of the Human Rights Commission of Malaysia, SUHAKAM. Associate Professor Dr. Melati Nungsari, Deputy Dean of Research, Asia School of Business and Faculty Director of the ASEAN Research Center. The honorable panelists, distinguished guests, ladies and gentlemen. Salam Sejahtera and a very good morning to everyone. First and foremost, I would like to convey my sincere appreciation to SUHAKAM and the Asia School of Business, or ASB, for jointly organizing today's event. I have the great pleasure in delivering this keynote address at this lecture on a very important topic, human rights and statelessness in Peninsular Malaysia. I welcome SUHAKAM's initiatives in addressing the issue of statelessness in the country and for having commissioned the research on human rights and statelessness, particularly in Peninsular Malaysia, which was completed and launched in March last year to produce evidence-based findings and recommendations on the issue of the rights of those who are stateless, particularly, as I said, here in Peninsular Malaysia. It was incidentally an honor for me to deliver the keynote address last year during its launch. As we are all well aware, statelessness has emerged as a significant global problem that affects millions of people. The 1954 Convention relating to the status of stateless persons defines a stateless person as, I quote, a person who is not considered as a national by any state under the operation of its law. Malaysia currently does not have a specific policy or legislation that provides a legal definition for stateless persons. The right to citizenship is a fundamental issue and a basic human right. There can be no doubt about that. It is a right that is inseparable from other rights. For example, an individual without citizenship would ultimately face violation of other rights, such as the right to education. The impact of statelessness is detrimental on children, families, and society at large. Without proper documentation and citizenship, one would be denied or face challenges in gaining access to other rights, such as the right to own property, the right to work, and the right to access education. They are also often stigmatized and are deprived of their right to participate fully in society. Basically, stateless persons would not be able to access the privileges of being citizens that are rendered by any state. Hence, they are often marginalized and suffer long-term, even lifelong negative implications. I believe the findings of SUHAKAM's report that will be shared by Dr. Melati shortly will create an awareness among all present today of the problem of statelessness and its impact on fundamental human rights. I hope this would also extend to society at large, given the importance of the issue. Ladies and gentlemen, there are many factors that contribute to statelessness, including discrimination against women. The rights of men to acquire, retain, and confer citizenship of their children differ greatly from those of women, and with such gender inequality, the risk of statelessness, particularly for children born to Malaysian women with foreign spouses, increases. While Article 8.1 and Article 8.2 of the Federal Constitution promotes equality and prohibits gender discrimination, various other provisions therein deny women equal rights in cases involving children born to Malaysian mothers with foreign spouses abroad. Malaysia has also been identified as one of 25 countries in the world that denies women the right to confer nationality on their children, as described earlier, on an equal basis with men. While Malaysian men have the right to confer citizenship to their children born abroad by registration under Article 14(1)(b) of the Federal Constitution, Malaysian women with foreign spouses are unable to confer citizenship on their children in the same manner due to the current provisions of the Federal Constitution. A law that prevents Malaysian mothers from conferring their nationality on their children is no doubt archaic, as every child born either to a Malaysian father or Malaysian mother abroad ought to be granted citizenship. Malaysian women should be treated the same as their male counterparts, as they equally contribute to the country's economic and social development. Malaysia has adopted the ASEAN Human Rights Declaration, which provides for the right to nationality under Article 18. It states, and I quote, "Every person has a right to a nationality as prescribed by law." Malaysia has also broadly accepted the provisions in the Universal Declaration of Human Rights, or the UDHR, as customary international law, which also has provisions on the right to nationality under Article 15(1), which states, and I quote, "Everyone has the right to a nationality." We also expressed our commitment, along with 193 other countries, to support and implement the 2030 Agenda and Sustainable Development Goals, or SDGs, which sets out an ambitious plan of action for the people, planet, prosperity, peace, and partnership, with the overarching objective of leaving no one behind. Target 69, or 16.9 of the SDGs aim to, I quote, "provide legal identity for all, including birth registration, by the year 2030. A failure to address statelessness still has a negative impact on Malaysia's efforts to meet this particular goal. As a member of the UN Human Rights Council for the term 2022 to 2024, Malaysia has a huge responsibility to ensure its pledges, as well as other commitments made at the international stage, which translates into concrete action for the betterment of human rights for all. Ladies and gentlemen, I believe the government is committed in ensuring that no one is indeed left behind, and have undertaken efforts to address the issue of statelessness in line with the Masyarakat Madani concept introduced by the Honorable Right Honourable Prime Minister. As mentioned by the Minister in the Prime Minister's Department of Law and Institutional Reforms, YB Dato Sri Azlina Osman Said, in a special address during the launch of SUHAKAM's report in March last year, statelessness is a global issue that hinders development and nation building. She expressed particular concern for stateless children's access to basic rights and emphasized the importance of taking a strategic approach to address the issue and call for collaboration between all stakeholders in the country. Recent developments show that the government is indeed endeavoring to amend the federal constitution in respect of citizenship rights of children born abroad to a Malaysian woman with a foreign spouse. The proposed amendments by the government to Part 3 of the federal constitution, together with the first schedule and second schedule of the said federal constitution on this issue, should be applauded. These amendments will give effect to the constitutionally guaranteed right to equality under Article 8 of the Constitution. However, I do acknowledge the concerns expressed by different stakeholders regarding other proposed amendments to the federal constitution by the government. I believe everyone has a role to play in contributing to reform and prosperity of the country. Law reform requires comprehensive involvement and cooperation between government ministries, agencies, as well as CSOs and NGOs. I know this, being a former deputy minister myself. I hope that today's event will go a long way in further moving the dial on the issue of statelessness, serving as a base for future in-depth and substantive discussion between different stakeholders, particularly among students, who are the future leaders of the country. Before I end, I am reminded of the following quote from H.E. Filippo Grandi at the 11th United Nations High Commissioner, and I quote, "The COVID-19 pandemic has shown more than ever the need for inclusion and the urgency to resolve statelessness. A pandemic doesn't discriminate between citizens and non-citizens. It is not in any state's, society's, or community's interest for people to be left stateless and living on the margins of society." With that, I thank you all for your time, and I hope you will have a fruitful discussion this morning during the panel session. Please share your ideas and thoughts so that we can build a better Malaysia. And you will be watching. I'm not sure if everyone here will be watching, but a few lucky ones will be watching Abang Adik, I think later this afternoon at 3 p.m. I watched it myself just recently, and I must say it is a fantastic movie, both in terms of its production and content. And I think the content is something which is very valuable. It shows the vulnerability of certain segments of society, those who are stateless, those who are helpless, and those in this category are those who are often victimized. And I think it's also, it is our duty as citizens of the country. We are privileged to not experience statelessness. I've done certain cases in my time as a lawyer, and I intend to go back to practice now because that's all I can do. But I have experienced cases of statelessness. I've done cases of statelessness. I've seen their plight. I've seen their hardship. And there's no doubt that it is something which we have to understand the mechanics of it. Imagine not being able to open a bank account. How do you run a business? Imagine not being able to get medical access if you are not a wealthy person. These are matters which are challenges, which I think the government must seriously look into. As I said earlier, the proposed amendments which have come about as a result of the Surya Kempe case are very much welcome. The Surya Kempe case is now pending in the federal court. In fact, leave has been granted, but that I think has been deferred or put on hold pending these proposed amendments. And we welcome those amendments because that will provide equality to children or to children born to women abroad with foreign spouses. But there are other worrying proposed amendments which have been thought about, and I think those other proposed amendments must be seriously reconsidered. And we as society, as NGOs, CSOs, and others with other stakeholders with an interest on this issue ought to get involved and partake in the debate when the time arises. So with that, enjoy the movie at 3 p.m. Thank you very much. I'm afraid I have to leave now for another appointment. Have a wonderful session. Thank you.
All right. Thank you, YB Ramkapal. If I can leave here for a while, I think we can invite Datuk Melati Robert to hand over some gifts of appreciation.
Thank you.
It's okay.
Thank you.
All right, thank you.
Thank you very
So
much.
if we can get very quickly everyone to come down and have a really quick group photo. So if I can get everyone to come and to the front, sorry.
Maybe it's better if I stand
If
this
stand
way.
here, if you can do that, or you should get tomorrow come over this side.
Yeah.
Okay. This side, okay lah, on this side lah.
Don't want to move already. So.
Okay. Okay, so if I can
Let's leave
get
this here
folks to fill in the corridors on the left and the right.
Thank you for nicely putting on the request. Oh, you can sit. YP's leaving, so you can take my seat. Take the seat here. Here, Nicole. Paul. This is for you.
Oh, thank you.
There you go.
Are they all in? Can they all get? I think they have to come in a bit.
Yeah, I think everybody needs to.
Yeah, it's a bit too wide otherwise.
Yes.
Your mic is still on. So
Oh yeah, I think
hears it very well.
As much as we can.
gotta watch my words.
Oh, ini boleh.
Hi. Yes. Forget it. Go back home. You know exactly what I did the whole day.
Okay. Okay. All right. Tak apalah. Boleh. Tak apalah. Okay. 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 All right. Okay, thank you everyone. So yeah, okay. So now, so there are still some seats in between. So if anyone would like to sit in between, please feel free to do so. So now I think I'd like to invite Dr. Melati, right, to start her lecture. Yeah.
Okay. Hi, everybody. Thank you so much for coming today. Full packed room, which is fantastic. So today, my role here basically is to tell you a little bit about the study that we did, give you the QR code again so you can download it, and then sort of set the stage, I think, for a bit deeper conversation. So my goal basically today is to not kind of, basically just offload a bunch of facts on you. I want it to be a bit more interactive. So we're going to do it class style because you're in your classroom, right? So basically, if you have any questions at any point in time, I would like you to raise your hand. There's a button in front of you. There's actually a mic. So that circular button in front of you, if you press it, and just say like, hey, stop, I have a question, I will stop and take your question. But I really just want to make it interactive, and I think, you know, we all can just watch YouTube videos if you're just looking for a lecture, right? So the point is that we should talk about all these issues because I think it's more important, more rich if we do so. So let me go ahead and start setting the stage. If I can have my slides. Oh, my slides, okay, perfect. So before I start, I just wanted to thank the entire team that made this happen. So I sort of hold multiple hats. I'm the Deputy Dean of Research at Asia School of Business. I'm also the Faculty Director of the ASEAN Research Center. And one of our main goals, I think, is sort of to, you know, host more events like this, do more impactful research, do more things that people care about, that have actual meaning. And so what we're going to do today is kind of a result of all the teams. I'd like to thank Natasha Jalil for kind of coordinating everything. We have the whole people who are ushering you in. We're very stressed out right now, so thank you all for all of that. My faculty colleagues, of course, SUHAKAM for being a fantastic partner. And I would also like to thank Nicole Fong, who is going to take all the questions instead of me. No, just like, so we both co-wrote this report/book. So it's a 300-page report, so I kind of call it a book. And then I also like to thank Shashi. So Shashi here. Thank you, Shashi, for being our basically only research assistant throughout this whole project. And Eric Paulson is not here today, but he was our legal counsel for the project. So I am not a lawyer, but I have been advised by a lawyer. But many of you are lawyers, I take it, so that's good. All right, so let's go ahead and start. So I just want to make sure everybody has a link to the report. So SUHAKAM, I think, is aligning with the principle of sustainability. And we are not giving out physical printed books, but we do have soft copies, of course. So if you scan this, it will take you directly to the report. And it is very long, but I think as you read it, I hope the flavor that comes out is really the people. So I'm an economist, I'm a microeconomist, so I always tell people I don't study exchange rates, I don't study trade, but I study people, kind of at the core, decisions that they make, their experiences and how that shapes them. And so the report itself is sort of, I think, reflects a lot of that. So it has a lot of lived experiences, it has a lot of direct quotes. So you can hear from the mouths of the people themselves about what happens when you're stateless, what happened in the registration process, what happens when you know, you are born and you don't know where your parents are, right? So all of that, I think, you'll kind of get a little bit of the sense from the people themselves in the book. And so what we're going to do today is at most 25 minutes, and then I hope we can have some kind of back and forth, and then we will have our exciting panel discussion. Now, the thing that I wanted to mention, and I will keep on being annoying with putting the QR code in front of you like this, but we'll talk a little bit about, I'll set the stage, and then I hope that you can ask more questions during the panel discussion, because it will have, you know, talking about citizenship rights, talking about discrimination, talking about, you know, what happens basically when you are stateless. So I hope a lot of this stuff can also come up in the panel later. All right, so what is statelessness? So we have heard a little bit from YB just now about sort of the definition of statelessness, but I think I would like to kind of bring you back to this piece of international law that you're all probably very familiar with. So Article 15 of the Universal Declaration of Human Rights, which is an international law document, basically states that everybody has a right to belong to a country and have nationality, right? So we kind of consider then the right to citizenship as sort of being a fundamental human right. Now, the issue, of course, is when we talk about this concept when operationalized, so what actually happens to people when they live, let's say in Malaysia, that does not really have a framework surrounding how to talk about statelessness, and I'll talk a little bit about hidden populations in a bit. But what happens when you live kind of very, very precariously, right? And I hope that the movie later illustrates that a little bit. But the idea and the definition that we're kind of going to work with is the following. So a stateless person is essentially somebody who, under national laws, does not enjoy citizenship, which we consider to be sort of a legal bond between a government and its individual in any country. So, question for you, because I want people to talk. So what responsibilities does the government have to you? So I'm saying here it's sort of a legal bond, right? What is involved in this bond? Protection, right? Thank you, Mimi, for coming. What else? Recognition, tell me a little bit more about that. Right, so you have a sense of home in a sense, right? So you belong to them in a sense, right? So if we all kind of like got lost, we have somebody we go to as sort of our leader. Okay, what else? Think about COVID. Was there anything during COVID whereby it was very crucial that you were actually a citizen in order to be able to access a resource? Medical, right? What else? Education, right? How about, I know a lot of you are from CSOs, how about aid? Right? So for a lot of government aid, government grants, a very key kind of gatekeeping principle was that you actually are either registered or they know kind of that you exist. Right? So if you are stateless, however, this poses, I think, additional issues because there's no kind of way to understand who you are. There's no kind of way of sort of measuring how large this population is, and I'll talk a bit about that in just a second. So the idea here is that, you know, there are kind of legal bonds, right? So there are responsibilities that your government basically owes you, and supposedly you also the government. So you vote, you don't do bad things, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. So when we're talking about statelessness, I just wanted to mention here, so while some people are sort of what we call de jure stateless, or legally stateless, so we have that being not recognized as citizens under the laws of any state, many people are sort of what we call de facto, which is basically effectively statelessness, meaning even though they have a claim to citizenship, they're kind of not recognized for whatever reason, and we'll go through some of those reasons in a bit. Now, the other thing I wanted to mention is when we're thinking about statelessness in Malaysia, it's kind of a bit important to distinguish between statelessness in Peninsular Malaysia versus actually Sabah and Sarawak. Now, does anybody know why? So I was quite clear, you know, the title of the book was Statelessness in Peninsular Malaysia. We're sort of situated within Peninsular Malaysia. Any thoughts about Sabah, Sarawak? Different systems, right? What else? Different borders, I think. Different history, right? With regards to how borders were determined. Different relationships, basically, with kind of who is on your border, right? And so it's very important to distinguish that I acknowledge that it is actually a very significant problem, actually statelessness in Sabah Sarawak. This report itself only concerns Peninsular Malaysia, so just to set that stage. All right, so then you may ask, how big is this problem, right? And so we know that, and you've probably heard a variety of human rights numbers basically that have been given. You will probably has numbers itself that sort of estimate the problem, right? But kind of a fundamental problem here is that stateless populations, due to the fact that there's no legal framework, is what we call hidden. So hidden is actually an academic terminology in thinking about how big a population is. So I have this kind of cute little picture here, and I even have some assigned readings for you if you'd like to read more. But essentially, we have the whole population. So this is kind of think about it as everybody who lives in Malaysia, right? We have hard-to-reach populations. So these are populations that are a subset, but are, for whatever reason, difficult to reach. Can you give me some examples of hard-to-reach populations? It can be physically hard. So rural communities, right, are hard to reach. So for whatever reason, then, it may be also difficult to kind of determine how large they are, right, in terms of a population. How else can people be hard to reach? Yes? Good, right? So you don't speak the same language, right? So you basically cannot communicate on sort of a very basic level in terms of needs, wants, stuff like that. What else? Yes? Correct. Perfect, right? So kind of nomadic, or people who move around for whatever reason. They don't have to be purely nomadic. They can be moving because maybe housing insecurity, right, for example. So people on the move. So hard to reach populations are, you know, we can kind of think about informality is a very large thing here in Malaysia, so this population is kind of easy to define. Now, within this population then, they can be what we call hidden subgroups. So hidden subgroups are sort of even smaller subsets of hard to reach populations. Now, why may people be hidden? So, you know, some of you may be from organizations that give out grants or receive grants, right? A question you always get asked is, show me the numbers, right? Show me your impact. How many people are you serving? How many people are actually in this community that actually, you know, are relevant to what you do, right? So why are people hidden? Why are communities hidden? Yes. That's a good question. Usually, most of the time, hidden, the way I've defined it, is actually both. So for stateless people, I would say it is by the fact that we don't have a legal framework, so there's no way to count, right? So one thing that we did when we did the study was actually talk to people who run our census, our Malaysian census, right? You have different categories, so you have, you know, Malaysian, you have foreigner, you don't have stateless. So if you're stateless, you're not foreign, what are you, right? Can't really track, but that's a really good question. So it could be intentional, could be unintentional, right? What are some other thoughts on hidden? Why else can people be hidden? So they can be hidden because legislative frameworks basically don't have a word for who they are. Yes? They know that if they meet the police or they meet law enforcement, that bad things will happen, and therefore they hide themselves, right? I think Abang Adik, the movie that you'll see, will illustrate quite a bit of, you know, what hidden actually means, right? And so the issue with that then is that numbers are very difficult to quantify. I can tell you, though, that it's pretty easy to speak to a stateless person in Malaysia if you look hard enough. And the fact that the existence is fairly close to you, so think about degrees of separation. You don't have to search very, very difficult to find a stateless person in Malaysia, I think says quite a bit about the extent. If you speak to, for example, people who work in shelters. I'm on the board of the ASN Child Kit, right? Very easy to find stateless children. Very easy to find families kind of grappling with statelessness. And so even though we do not have big estimates, maybe our colleagues from DRA can tell us later, this is a very significant problem.
Dr. Melati,
Yes.
is statelessness equivalent to illegal?
Ooh, this is a very loaded question. Thank you, Lily Wong. Can people be illegal? Yes. Tell me, sir, why?
Criminalizing them before
True.
anything.
True. I would prefer the term undocumented
Yeah, or irregular.
or irregular. Yes.
Thank you.
If that's the case, there's no reason why they should hide, right?
Ooh, I will tell you many reasons why they should hide. I mean, yes, yeah.
Perception and misconception as well?
It's a lack of people knowing where to put you. I think in Malaysia and a lot of countries, we like to put people in boxes, right? For good or for worse. The good part is you can measure, right? I can tell you exactly how many people are Malay in Malaysia. I can tell you exactly how many people were born in Kedah in Malaysia. I was born in Kedah. But if there's no box for you to fit in, then where do you fit? And that itself brings huge amounts of difficulties, as we're going to talk about. All right. So, because I want to give couldn't give pre-readings. So, if you like to think about hidden populations, which is fascinating, you can download this paper, which I have prepared in PDF, but yeah, don't tell people that it's there. So, this paper kind of talks about what we call respondent-driven sampling. So, many of you, I think, are students. So, one question you may have is, you know, how do we actually figure out how, you know, like if you've met 2 stateless people in Malaysia, is that enough? How do you know there's more? How do you get a big enough sample for it to make sense for you in terms of being able to say something? So respondent-driven sampling, and the whole full paper is here, is a way, a methodological way, you can kind of think about that a little bit. Now, one thing I wanted to mention, and hopefully leads a little bit into our panel discussion, is we have, you know, when I was first doing this and I was interviewed by the SUHAKAM commissioner, who asked me, Dato' Ma, he was like, why do you think you're qualified to study this? Because you're an economist, which is a fantastic question, and kind of made me pause. And I think one thing that has been lacking quite a bit is sort of the human touch, the social science touch, right? So what basically is happening outside of the legal sphere, so I'm going to tell you about the federal constitution, all of that, but what is actually happening on the day-to-day basis? What's happening when a parent, tries to enroll their kids in like standard 1 and you can't, right? What happens when you have fights with the JPN officer because they told you the wrong form and you didn't know about it? So kind of the lived experience part of it, which actually intersects multiple parts. It intersects poverty, it intersects economics. So how do you sort of participate in the market with other people? It intersects women's rights. We have a lot of abuse problems that come out of this as a result of this. Mental health is a very big feature of this. Politics, we have policy makings. And I think that, hopefully the panel discussion will also talk about, we have the constitutional amendments kind of going on now, right? And so it's a very intersectional issue. And so the way we approach it also, I think, has to be intersectional, right? Talking about the law without talking about day-to-day experiences, I think, does not make sense. Now, when we're thinking about how I analyzed this with Nicole, we basically looked at the following framework. There's a minor typo here, which always bugs me, which I never fix, and I always see it. That's citizenship, but anyway. So, I shouldn't have pointed it out, right? I was telling my husband, he's like, just don't point it out, but sorry. So we kind of look at this framework. So we look at basically every single thing I've told you in this. I'm going to show you a series of findings. And every single finding is basically backed up by data, right? So I'm not pulling this from a desk review. I'm not saying this is my personal thoughts. Melati is a person, as a researcher, but I'm telling you what is actually happening on the ground from the words of people who have told us what happened. But we kind of looked at this. So we looked at kind of the life journey of a stateless person. We looked at what happens before your birth that you had no control over, that could potentially kind of lead you to become stateless. We have looked at looking at, maybe applying for citizenship, so what happens in that process. We have looked at what happens when you acquire citizenship, maybe, and what are kind of the general effects, what goes wrong in the process of applying for citizenship, what goes wrong in terms of birth registrations, documentations, and so we kind of looked at the report in sort of this kind of holistic life journey kind of way. So now I'm just going to run through a bunch of different things for you, but hopefully, you kind of have this framework in mind, right? So people the cause of them being stateless can come from various points in their life, and so we kind of break that down a little bit to understand how that works. Now, where's the data from? So basically, this 9-month study, we did do a desk review. So we looked at basically all the reports written, by government, by various ministries. We looked at what is happening abroad. So how countries deal with statelessness in other places, different national frameworks, stuff like that. Data collection was done throughout COVID, which is very challenging, but we were actually able to physically go in and talk to people. We managed to sample people from all across Peninsular Malaysia, but they sort of fell into one of these groups broadly. So I'm not going to go through every single one of them, but for example, we have indigenous persons, we have stateless refugees, we have this is kind of our and others category, so people don't fit into any of the other categories, but adopted children or parents of adopted children, that was another one. And so we sort of tried to get as comprehensive a view as possible on statelessness by looking at different populations. Now, when we're thinking about documentation, so we actually run through documentation quite a bit in the book. And the reason why is, statelessness is sort of results from this lack of documentation, right? But if you think about what you had to do in order to get your blue IC, I have a blue IC, most of you have blue ICs, many things had to happen before you got that, right? Does anybody know what has to happen? So before you get your IC, you have to, you need the birth certificate, right? So can you, a baby, go register for birth certificate? No. So somebody should have gone in to register you, right? Somebody had to basically show, for example, proof of marriage. Marriage has to be recognized locally. If you get married in Thailand, for example, and you don't register it here, you may run into issues, right? Your parents have to be present, right? They actually have to go physically show their face. I'm the father of this child. There are also stipulations on whether or not your kid, whether or not the father or mother is Malaysian, depends, that kind of, whether or not you become Malaysian depends on that as well. But there's a lot that has to happen before that, and we actually run through in the book every single thing that needs to happen. So for example here, and it's very small, kind of to make a point, so this column is what happens if it's normal birth registration, so meaning your parents were, good parents, got you registered on time, got your name right? So, okay, not too many lah, boleh lah, like, you'll get it done, right? But then you move, like, to the right, and then you see the list of documents kind of keeps on increasing. So this is late registration in a hospital. So you need a bit more kind of proof, right? So people need to attest, yes, this mother gave birth to this child, that this child was in fact this, born here. But then if you go right here, so home birth, so births in villages, it even gets more complicated, right? So if you've known pregnant people, you know that sometimes you don't really have a choice of where you give birth. You kind of plan to be in a hospital, but it doesn't happen there. So for a lot of circumstances outside of your control, the burden of documentation almost exponentially increases. And one thing that we have found is, and we have here quotations a lot, but it's typically easy for applicants to apply if everything is normal. But if one minor thing didn't work, right? Like again, your parents were married in another country, did not register it here. Your mother accidentally gave birth in a place she didn't intend to, which is outside of a hospital. Any little piece of that can potentially cause a problem. And the burden of documentation is very high. What if you are disabled? What if you are illiterate? What if you cannot basically go through this process? Then your kids, who were born to you, who didn't do anything, are at risk of statelessness. Now, the other thing I wanted to mention here is that there are, and I won't talk about this very much, but there's sort of a larger context we sit within, which is the international law part, but we also have a number of provisions in the federal constitution that sort of talk a little bit about citizenship, right? So we have acquisition of nationality, we have operation law, registration, naturalization, incorporation of a territory. We have loss of nationality, so how does that work if you renounce Malaysian citizenship? When can you be deprived of it? Kind of facts around that. But the idea is that our constitution, before I did this project, I actually did not study the constitution very much, but it's actually very comprehensive, right? So it's supposed to be this kind of catch people from being in a very kind of, quote, bad situation. Now we'll talk about the constitutional amendments in a bit, but the idea is that there are provisions that are supposed to, in theory, protect this from happening. And in fact, if you read the report, we kind of talk about statelessness as sort of being a demonstration of the failure of the state to kind of provide a basic human right, right? So the fact that it exists is problematic. Now, we can talk more about this, but I think the more interesting part is thinking about how the state itself defines how this looks. So this is a picture that I know people don't, Nicole doesn't like me using it, but I use it. So it's a picture that JPN had given before, and it's just sort of very categorical. So remember I said people want to put you in a box, right? So this is one way. Imagine, even though you have rights of citizenship, somebody at the counter, and I urge you to think about the person at the counter in the movie later, because it's quite interesting, but they need to put you somewhere, right? And so the person accepting your documents is going to kind of put you in one of these, right? So let's say both parents are Warga Negara, married or not, you're Warga Negara, right? So we have that. But we also have kind of explicit discrimination, honestly, against, for example, parents, or depending on basically where they are, right? So for example here, we have that father Malaysian, mother not Malaysian, not married, not Malaysian, right? So there are explicit kind of discrimination pieces in it, but I think one thing we'd like to argue quite a bit is there's sort of implicit biases that happen throughout the process that are actually more problematic than, well, not more, but probably as problematic as the explicit kind of discriminatory pieces as well. And when we're thinking about this also is, I'm going to findings next. So I just want you to kind of think about categorization and why that can be easy and nice administratively from a government's perspective, but something that can bring kind of a lot of issues. Now, I'm going to move on to findings. So what we did was basically generated transcripts, and then we kind of partitioned it. It's kind of boring I just put this up here to say we did some work. But basically, everything I'm going to show you later is going to be a result of the data set. Nothing is generated from me. All right. So how do people become stateless? So remember that kind of trajectory. Keep that red picture in your head, right? So we have issues surrounding marriages. We have not properly registered for whatever reason that is. We have foreign spouse. And we have Representative Family Frontier to talk about, you did everything right, but you just happen to give birth abroad, right? And married the wrong kind of man, I guess. So being punished for choices that somewhat out of your control. But any issues like that, so, can result in statelessness. We have issues surrounding parents. So parents estranged, so, you don't talk to your father anymore. But again, both need to show up to register you, right? So how does that work? Migrant parents or ancestors, we have quite a number of documented kind of multi-generational. So I talked about generational statelessness there, where when, Malaysia became a country, there were sort of campaigns to get people registered, but maybe some people sort of slipped through the cracks. That happened as well. We have issues of birth registration, so this came up quite a bit. High travel costs, so for rural communities, traveling to get registered is a big thing, which is why going to them is actually a good solution for this, and JPN does do quite a bit of that. And then we have, issues surrounding the birth itself, right? So if you're born out of wedlock, as you saw before, you may not be entitled to Malaysian citizenship. Not, again, properly registered. So documentation, what form you use, stuff like that all plays quite a big role. We also have issues of JPN. So we had, for example, actually, this is interesting. Maybe I should ask you all. So do you know what a red IC is? Have you seen a red IC? What is a red IC? You're a permanent resident, right? Tell me. Somehow, right? You're sort of like stuck in this. Right. So there's red ICs, which is permanent resident. So not quite a citizen. You get, you're documented. You have a document that says you are a permanent resident. You have blue ICs, like the ones that most of you in this place have. And then in the book, we also talk about green ICs. Yes, green ICs. So these are ICs given sort of as like temporarily. So if you look at your IC, blue IC people, you don't have an expiry date. Green ICs have expiry dates, right? And red ICs, one thing that we have seen basically was that red ICs are sort of used as what we call a stopgap measure. So instead of going the full way to become a full citizenship of all the rights, you become a red IC person. And we've seen that kind of happen forever. Now, the issue with that is, for example, if parents are both, red ICs or whatever, grandparents, stuff like that, that can kind of trickle down in ways that can later cause their descendants to be stateless, right? Depending on what the situations are. So we have that. We have issue basically with having citizenship revoked. We had spoken and kind of saw some data on that. We have refugee or asylum seeker status. So one thing I wanted to mention here is that most refugees are not stateless, right? But some refugees are. So I put here Rohingya people, for example, are a kind of hyper-marginalized group because they are not only refugees, but they are also stateless, meaning they do not have citizenship access basically to any country, right? So it also intersects, for example, refugee rights and human rights surrounding, populations on the move and how that works. We have discrimination going on quite a bit. Minorities tend to have more difficult time going through this process. We spoke to border communities with Thailand and Malaysia, similar kind of issues. It really depends on, again, who is at the counter to kind of speak to you at the time. And, there can be a lot of other problems. So this is kind of just the stuff I pulled out. But, there's also this, if you think about this process, people can also ask, okay, so can you apply for citizenship? Of course you can, right? And there is a process, and there's a whole flow chart. But the issue is, I think, when we're looking at this process is every single step here, there's no telling basically when you can move from box 1 to box 2. How long does that take? If you don't progress, for example, there's no feedback given to you. So, You can apply, for example, for citizenship, get rejected. They don't tell you, was it the wrong form? Was it something I didn't complete? Was it something about certification? Like what happened here, right? There's absolutely no feedback given to applicants. So imagine putting in an application for your child, waiting for 5 to 6 years, and getting something that says no, and you're in limbo in the meantime. So we have basically a lot of the issues kind of with the process. So one thing I want to highlight here is, again, burden of paperwork. So there's difficulty tracing people. There's also a lot of, the long waiting time I think causes quite a bit of mental health anguish. And I think it will be apparent why in just a second. So we're sort of stuck in this kind of bad loop, very bad loop. So where we can have basically statelessness caused by, perpetuated by inequities, and then we have lack of discrimination causes more lack of citizenship causes more discrimination, and then you're denied basic human rights, can't go to school, can't get access to public resources, and then basically you can't access the system, and then it sort of goes on in this loop. And this is a terrible loop. Like when we look at pictures, I feel like I need to emphasize, this is a horrible situation to be in. From an economics perspective, it is incredibly terrible to have basically a sizable amount of the population not being able to, improve themselves, increase their human capital investments, become productive people to the market, to the economy, to society, right? And so we have huge losses here, but also I just would like you to put yourselves in the feet of parents, right, who are kind of grappling with this. It can be seemingly never-ending. And now when we're thinking about what are some effects, right? So what if you don't have documents, right? Can you live? Like YB Ramkapal said just now, you can't can't open a bank account, can't get a job. So we had spoken to a formerly stateless person who was so happy when he got his blue IC because he said, I can finally work. Like I can take that job that they offered me because now I can be paid and it's legal now to kind of employ me as a person, right, in this economy. And so we have a lot of issues here, and like YB said before as well, it kind of compounds, right? So one, don't have citizenship, you're more, for example, vulnerable to domestic abuse, workplace abuse. You have mobility restrictions, so imagine basically continuously feeling like you cannot go out of a place because somebody might apprehend you. I think this feeling, this kind of like restlessness, but also deep fear was very well done in the movie, so, things to pay attention to. We have a lot of emotional scarring. We have, a lot of sort of this, what we call shadow world, right? So a situation whereby you cannot access any resources. So think about during the COVID pandemic, it was if you had to show ID to get a food basket, if you had to show ID to get a cash handout when you really needed it, that would be a huge problem for stateless people, right? Or because you're hidden, people don't even know that you're in this, apartment complex in this block, right? So all of these become, very large issues. And when we think about, statelessness interfacing with human rights, so we actually went through the data set and counted which kind of violations happen the most. And we have, these are all UDHR articles, and we looked at, kind of how often did it occur. So we have right to discrimination, of course, because a lot of these things are, in fact, discriminatory. So like I said, minority groups tend to have harder time kind of navigating through the system. But we also have, freedom of opinion and expression. I mean, if you're worried that you're going to get caught, why would you, continuously kind of express yourself? Right to education. This is a huge issue because it impacts kids. People don't like to think about kids as future contributors to the economy, but they are, right? 7-year-old in 10 years is going to enter the workforce, if you want to look at it in sort of a very cynical way. And there are all sorts of different violations that we talk about quite a bit in the paper, but I would urge you to kind of think through and read basically what the participants said with regards to each of these, which I think is quite telling. And so, we're thinking about attempts then. So what has been done to resolve this? It's a very difficult issue to, quote, resolve because it's intersectional. It basically is a legal thing, it's also a politics thing, it's a racial thing as well sometimes, right? But there have been, I think, some amount of movement in trying, kind of, to resolve some of this. We have, for example, I should mention this as well, so targeted registration initiatives. So when a group is far away, hard to access, hard to reach, you don't expect them to come to you, you have to go to them, right? It is your responsibility, essentially, to make sure they're in the system. And we see quite a bit of that happening with JPN. It could be more, but there's quite a bit of that happening. There's also been kind of a little bit of amended SOPs, which people are pushing for, so at least tell people why they didn't get citizenship, right? Give people a time limit, like this part of your application process is going to take X amount of time. So there's advocacy groups, and we'll hear more from them and stuff like that. But I wanted to kind of leave us here. I think this is like my last slide. So this is the big issue, which actually did not cover in the book, which I hope the panelists will cover. So hint, hint, please cover this. So as you know now, there is a number of actually amendments to the federal constitution that I showed you before, what it does, right? That are happening now with regards to thinking about statelessness and thinking about people's ability to access citizenship, right? So I'm sure many of you are here to listen about this, so I hope that the panel will talk a little bit more about what does this mean? Will this make statelessness worse? Will this solve any issues? Will this take away or add more issues? I mean, it will. That's the short answer. But let's talk about sort of how this works. And then finally, I think that's it from me. Yeah. Oh, yeah, that is actually exactly my last slide. It's not moving. Oh, there you go. All right, so just another reminder, if you didn't scan it, read the book. It's fun, I think. And is that the last one? Yeah, I think that's the last one, right? Yes, all right, thank you so much. Now, I want to just open the floor to questions, if any people have any, and we can just discuss it. Nicole is rereading the book now, so she can answer questions.
Hi, Doctor.
Yes.
Out of all the participants, I'm just asking,
Yeah.
is there any participant who choose to be stateless?
Choose to be stateless.
Is there? Thank you.
Yeah, no, absolutely not. Absolutely not. So there was nobody there who chose to be stateless, no. Do you want to add anything, Shashi? No. Any other questions? Yes? Yep. Yep. So in the 1980s, I think, Myanmar passed a law that basically talked about the ethnic groups that were considered citizens or had access to citizenship. And if I am correct, Rohingyas were not included in that list. And so that is sort of what started this idea of no citizenship. Yeah, so they do not have access to Myanmar citizenship, and of course not Malaysian either. Yes, Amy? Yeah.
I forgot about that. So the refugee status trumps the stateless status. So when you talk about statelessness, it only applies when that population is within their supposedly home country. So the moment they leave
They're
the national border and they become asylum seekers or refugees, then it's a different thing altogether, and that status trumps the statelessness.
Thank you, Lily, for pointing that out.
Thank you.
Any other questions? Yes, 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 sorry.
Are you aware that besides the red IC, there's a green IC?
I talked about that, yes.
Yes, called My Cars. That's
Yep.
being issued more now, but that green IC will take, you have to wait 10 years.
Yes,
Before
and,
you
and there
apply.
is an expiry, I think 3
Yeah.
years, right?
It's
Yep.
given to those above 21, those who can't apply
Yep.
for citizenship. And from the red IC, then you get on to go to your My PR, which is the red IC.
Yep.
And that again is at the discretion,
Yep.
right? And it takes so actually, if you're 21 and you got your My Cars, a friend just got it last week, 26, she said she had no choice.
Yep. You take
Only
what's given,
because
right?
she didn't
Yep.
want to be stopped at a roadblock
Yep.
and totally no identification. Worse off than refugees with UNHCR card, right? I can't find my adopted stateless kid an internship, found him an internship, but
Yep.
no company can take him because they're afraid of
Yep.
labor law violations. So that's with the identification. More recently, I think Suhakam has said, give temporary identification to stateless kids. I'm also scared because if that's given, it might lock them into waiting
Yeah.
period.
Yes.
Yeah, because they can't have this cloud over their head. That's one.
Yep.
And that's the other thing you mentioned was difficulty in stateless kids getting adopted.
Yep.
Yes, 2 were returned to their institutional homes
Yep.
last year. You're aware of that.
Yep.
Because it's so difficult after
Yes.
9 years of being adopted.
Yes.
It's heartbreaking to think parents could not, and I don't blame them, because I look after 5 kids and I think it is not just heartbreaking, it's crazy, because it's unbelievable unless it's a lived experience. Okay, it's you look the same, but the mental health, the way you need to talk,
Yep.
and I know that there have been a few suicides,
Yep.
and 13 years ago even there was a girl who took bleach, after which she took bleach and she was given an ID. That's the thing here. And one last point, Orphan Care celebrated their 15th anniversary, 15 years, and they are the people who look after dumped babies, abandoned kids, and institutionalized children. Their record is 500 over 15 years, including placement, just placement with. You're right in saying that it's easier for documented kids,
Yep.
stateless kids, meaning Orphan Care tries to find the mother.
Yep.
Because a Malaysian mother
Yep.
can, unwed Malaysian mother, can pass
yep.
on citizenship to the kid, and that's, in fact, those are the kids that Orphan Care gets adopted, but not the ones who are totally undocumented.
Yep.
And it's quite crazy, but
Yep.
it's sad because, you know, there are 134 children, 34,000 that in April last year, Minister of Home Affairs said had submitted applications under 15A. Under 15A, and this is 89.5% of total citizenship applications of 150,000. Sorry, I do my homework. I'm just saying that,
it's very
you know,
good.
but I'm going by the book, and I'm just looking out for my 5 kids as well as others.
Yep.
But I'm saying it's a process I will never ever want to go into again if I had known.
Yep.
I
Me
was
too.
not told, although I was recommended by my MP to
not.
go to JKM when I found out about these kids in
Yeah.
2018, and it has been a very traumatic journey till now. Guardianship for the father, to the father first 2 years, where you wait, only then do you have a birth certificate, after which the unwed father has to adopt his own biological children.
Yep.
I freaked out when I saw the father listed as informant in the birth certificate. I said, but mother has abandoned them. No information whatsoever.
Yep.
Zero from mother. Just a birth card.
Yep.
The others were homeborn. I'm just saying, this is a very deterrent
adoption.
situation.
Yep.
Where if I can turn back the clock and I know what I know today, I will stay away from helping my kids. I'm sorry to say that, because it is not worth the effort. NGOs may be registering, and yes, I will help you and whatever it is.
Yep.
I'm saying it because I'm
No,
very
thank you.
sad, but it takes a very strong person, and you sacrifice your life
For this
to go
purpose.
through this, and I'm just, so these are the points I'm
No,
bringing
thank
out.
you. Thank you so
Yeah,
much
just to
for
let you
telling
know.
us that.
Yep.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think just to echo you as well, I think there's a lot of in the book we talk a lot about experiences, you know, of parents and guardians
I
like
read your
yourself.
report before, and,
Oh,
and
wow.
I was quite, when it came out and it was debated in Parliament,
Yeah.
the fact that JPN does not even give you cooperation. That's
You.
downright.
It was in a footnote. You read very carefully.
No, that's downright rude, and that's the same thing that happens to everybody. It's
Home
too
ministry. Home
humiliating.
ministry.
All right, you don't get a response. You send 3 emails, whatever it is. Yes. I take screens. It's here. It's very traumatic because to a stateless mind,
Yeah.
a single word mentioned is stuck in your head.
Yeah.
Okay, normal people can go through straight lines.
Yeah. But
A
you cannot.
stateless person, I hang on to every word that PMX mentioned, Anwar Ibrahim, yeah, January 19th, that must give dignity back and to our children.
Yeah.
Okay, 2017, he is behind bars and he says, statelessness cannot be like this. It's a big shame to the nation. I will go back to 2004. But there's so much documentation like yours.
Yep.
I don't think GPN reads, nor are they bothered.
No. We had to do some light.
We can't work in a
espionage.
vacuum, sorry.
No, that's true. Yes, KDN I think attended our launch event.
I'd like to
but
share one experience that I have. Actually, currently I'm handling one case. A man aged 44, born out of wedlock, father Malaysian, mother Indonesian. So eventually, I do not know how, he got a green IC. So what happened was green IC ends, then his life is in disaster because the mother remarried so many times. The sibling got the blue IC.
Yep.
And then the whole situation is actually like when went to the JPN, they asked him to apply for the Indonesian citizenship, which he doesn't even know. Yeah, who am I?
Yeah.
That of situation, and then the process has been going through for the past 8 years already.
Yeah.
It's still stuck there. Then every time it's actually in the process.
Yeah.
So I wonder in this type of situation, right, they cannot have work, they cannot work, can only sell hamburger at night.
Yeah.
For their survival
That
and this
happens.
sort of thing. So I wonder in your research whether you encounter with a lot of these type of cases of green IC.
Yeah, so we did encounter people with green ICs quite a bit. But maybe to speak a little bit more about what you said, we also encountered quite a number of people who were told, you know, you need to find the Indonesian embassy to give you a passport or something like that, right? Or go to this other country and they'll deal with it, even though you have completely no relation to that country anymore and you've been here and born here and all of that stuff. So yes, unfortunately, this is a common problem.
Where's the future lies?
I don't know. Yeah, it's very bleak, I think. So let me pivot away from this corner, this other corner. Yes.
Yeah, I would like to share a personal example of mine.
Yes.
Yeah.
Sorry.
So-
You and then you. Sorry. Yes.
Okay.
Go on.
Yep. So my father held a red IC for more than 60 years because my grandparents were the first generation came to Malaysia from China,
Right.
and without proper documentation, and my father got red IC.
Right.
And because of that, even when I grew up as a child,
Yep.
I couldn't have the access to some of the government aids and whatnot. Yeah.
Yes.
And my father also couldn't have the fair opportunity to a lot of job opportunities.
Right.
So he worked as some freelance. That time didn't call freelance, but if now we
Informal.
yeah. So it's like freelance, lorry driver, and side gigs kind of thing.
Right.
And he tried a lot of time to submit
Apply.
proper documentation to apply for blue IC because he's born in Malaysia, just without proper documentation.
Yeah.
And that time, a lot of JPN officers actually offered him sort of like the
Fast
quick
pass?
copy package, and he didn't take it.
Yeah.
And when the Pakatan government took over for the very first time, he tried again under our encouragement.
Yeah.
And he finally got the blue IC after waiting for more than 60 years.
Wow.
Yeah, so I would say still some positive hopes, but
Thank you.
things will develop
Just
slowly.
to mention, Chio is also one of our former students, very successful, runs Carbotech, so congratulations. He must be really proud of you. And yes.
All right. Hi, Dr. Melati. Saran here. I just want to know, in your opinion, through the research that you've done, or what you've probably seen on the ground, what methods or possibly range of methods that you've seen that has worked or has a higher possibility of working, especially in the context of our region in Malaysia, similar to this, that can reduce statelessness. I mean, based on what you see, that maybe could be applied to the context here, because different countries have different ways, right? Yeah.
Yes. Do you want to take that? Don't glare.
It would definitely need to start with political will, which there is none of. And that would need a lot of engagements with like MPs, aduns, to even just to get them informed about what's happening. Because what's happening right now is that there's a new set of MPs who maybe like may not know a lot about statelessness. So yeah, I would say that's the first thing that we kind of need to do to kind of like get them aware about what's happening with statelessness, how it affects them, get them to actually meet stateless people, like what's kind of happening in this room right now. And that also needs to happen in tandem with sort of like public awareness. So, you know, if you watch Abang Adik, that's a really good opportunity to really get to know that. But yeah, really, it's unfortunately very stuck in the hands of, policymakers and our MPs, because they are the ones who choose how to basically interpret laws and translate those laws into actual policies. And those policies are what JPN is the one who's implementing these policies. So it kind of needs to start from like top all the way to bottom, talking to your MPs. I mean, not talking to your MPs, but getting the MPs on board with our cause, and also just, you know, and also getting them to commit to that, and making them basically say, yes, JPN, you need to do better. Stop making people's lives terrible.
Thank you,
I
Nicole.
hope that
But no,
answers
so
your
I wanted to
question.
add as well. So we actually I won't be able to go into it in detail, but in the book, there's actually a section that talks about what other countries do that you might find interesting. I think in one of the later chapters. So that chapter I think will be particularly useful for you. And then one thing I just wanted to add on to there is, I think that having somebody guide you through the process improves your outcome significantly. So I think NGOs, CSOs that kind of know how the process is and kind of advise you throughout it, I think that has improved your likelihood of success. Because, you know, when I first started this, I think Eric Paulson, our legal counsel, he said, you're going to find out that a lot of it is because of forms. Do you remember? He was like, it's the wrong form. And it's true. It's a lot of times that it's the wrong form. So there's all this high level stakeholder engagement and stuff like that, but on sort of like a one-to-one basis, like how you actually go through the process really does matter. All right, I think we have, no more questions. I said, okay, fine, all right. Okay, so thank you so much. We'll take a quick break and then come back in.
Many apologies because we are running up very short of time. So we'll take a 10 minutes break. If you have any questions, we can talk about, you know, personally come and meet Dr. Melati. Yes, so let's be back in about 11:35, so about 10 minutes break for panel to start our panel session. Thank you very much. Yeah. No, yeah.
adjourn to the refreshment area because we're prepping for the panel.
Berapa orang?
Ni tak boleh alih.
Oh, tak. Kursi 5 eh?
Oh, 4.
4.
Dah. So we have to like.
Check.
Yeah, this is fine. Thank you.
How close do you want it to be?
I think this is okay.
Are we doing the curve or we said no curve?
I think moderator needs to be curved, but the rest.
Yeah, the rest
Okay.
is fine.
Then let's just arrange it neatly lah.
Thank you. Are you okay? Sorry. Thanks, honey. I will do a handover of that. No, but these are all like
Check. 1, 2. Check 1, 2. Check 1, 2. Test. Check 1, 2.
possible. I mean, if the employer wants to take that risk, and a lot of them do, as you said, it's possible. Usually employers don't have much power in connecting that.
Yes, I think so. So I just wonder if
so there was, a couple of years ago, there was this thing called, if you look at the, do you know the Tent Foundation? Yeah. They were trying to do it here in Malaysia, but there just has not been much appetite. So I think the multinationals are more likely to do this, but not the SMEs.
Yeah,
it's harder.
Yeah, okay.
But informality is good, like, you know, opening your own business, selling from your home, that's another opportunity.
And also that's why I'm
Thank you so much. Hi. Yes. Okay. Yeah, actually, scan my Sabah and Sarawak, I'm afraid, I think should be carried out by somebody from Sabah and Sarawak. So it is. They can. So we do kind of in the book we do kind of like an overview of generally what happens, but we also acknowledge, you know, Sabah has raised Sabah specific issues. Yeah. So I think we can build off of it, and I'm quite sure we can also. I think they've already commissioned maybe one more. I'm quite sure they've already commissioned.
It's been a long time. I don't know what's happening.
But that report,
right? In Sabah especially people by Jalao. Yeah, it's very different. Yeah,
very good to ask.
Better person to ask actually.
Alright. Sounds good. Thank you so much. I spoke to you. Yes, correct. Thank you for coming. I like your shirt.
Yeah, I wasn't that concerned. I had a question. You ignored me just now.
Sorry.
I'm sorry. What was your question? That's okay. But yeah, the question is perennial. Like, what do we do about this? Because you know,
I'm hoping these people tell us.
You see, the problem is not systematizing the way you did, which you did an amazing job. The problem is getting it in there, and not like I don't know.
Yeah, I know.
Uncertainty is the fundamental feature of Malaysian system.
I know, it's terrible.
So they'll tell you what it is. So
yeah.
they always
The interesting thing is, like, somebody was mentioning to me just now that, like, the informality can also be a strength in a way, because, but not a solution. Like, because, you know, you can operate your own business and do things under the table while you wait. But the point is that you don't want to forever be stuck in that, right? Because that would be bad.
And well, the people who have money, they try to solve it with money.
They get out,
They turn the system.
Yep. Well, I mean, imagine all the migrants. Let's hear from. I'm hoping they give more, but yeah. Thank you so much.
I'm surprised none of ours are here. Stuff I expected to see.
Yeah, Michael. Why is Michael Mustafa?
Michael Mustafa.
You're welcome. I'm glad. Where are you from? Okay. You with Anita then? Sounds good. So thank you so much for coming. I hope it was useful. You are the person we should be thanking for birthing this wonderful person. No, it's not. Taking away my trouble. Are you? Really? Which part of Kedah? Same. My parents started out in Singapore. IUM.
On the governance side.
Test. Hello.
Testing. Testing. Testing.
Testing.
Testing. Testing. Testing.
Testing. Oh, belum. Oh, belum buka. Okay. Okay. All right. So we're gonna start very soon. So we'd like to invite our guest to come to join us in the hall.
We finally meet. We have to. We have to. I've included your slide. I've included the image that you sent me. Okay, cool. So just cue me when you get it.
Oh wait, I thought this was a photo.
What is it? It's a cup, is it? Cup holder.
No, it's a cup holder.
It moves, by the way, so it's just.
All right. So please be seated. We will start very soon. We'll start right now. All right. So thank you for coming back. So right now we are going into our panel session on "Am I Not Malaysian? The Crisis of Statelessness." So this panel will be moderated by our senior research associate Rachel De Cruz, and she'll be introducing our fellow panelists. So and we will be doing this. We'll be talking for about 45 minutes, and she'll be bringing us through today. All right. Now I'll hand over to Rachel.
Thank you, Zai. Hello, everyone. I'm Rachel, Senior Research Associate at the ASEAN Research Center. So with me today is our esteemed panel, and we hope to have a lively discussion, not just among the panel members, but also with all of you, our audience. So we will ask the panelists questions today for about half an hour, and we'll reserve the last 15 minutes for Q&A. So keep your questions ready, and you'll get a chance to ask our esteemed panel members questions at the end. So let me first introduce our panelists. So first we have Dr. Rosiana Mohamad Razali. She is a senior lecturer at the Faculty of Sharia and Law at the Islamic Science University of Malaysia. She has her PhD from the National University of Malaysia, UKM, and she has taught courses in international law, human rights, and migration law. She has also conducted consultations and research projects with UNICEF, UNHCR, and the Ministry of Home Affairs in Malaysia, and has many publications as well, including some in Scopus journals. The second panelist here today is Patricia Loam. She is the Research and Policy Coordinator at Family Frontiers, and she's also an activist and a poet. So she uses poetry as a form of advocacy in this issue, particularly of statelessness. She advocates change and the constitutional amendment for equal citizenship rights. Our third panelist for today is Malini Ramelow. She is the Director of Social Protection for DRA. That stands for the Development of Human Resources for Rural Areas in Malaysia. So DRA is an NGO that's working to address statelessness. So we'll be able to hear from Malini how she has actually assisted people who were formerly stateless. Together with her, also from DRA, is Joanne Chua, who is a project coordinator with DRA, as well as a paralegal, and a formerly stateless person. She is an advocate for those fighting for citizenship. So that's our panel, everyone. So we are all set today now for a lively panel discussion. And we'll start off with the first question, which I will ask Dr. Rosiana to get us started with. And that is, what are the constitutional provisions that protect vulnerable groups from being stateless? So Dr. Rosiana, over to you.
Okay, thanks, Rachel. Good morning and hi, everybody. It's great to be here. All right, the question is very straightforward. So Malaysia, among the ASEAN countries, actually has some of the strongest protections against statelessness in our constitution, in our federal constitution. Despite the fact that we also have some gaps in our nationality legal framework, we do have these very strong safeguards against statelessness, right? And number one is for foundlings, which is in 19B Part 3, which has to be read together with Section 14, Article 14 of the Federal Constitution, and this is in fact in line with the customary international norm of protection for foundling against statelessness, right? Whereby a child a newborn found exposed in any part of the country is deemed to have been born to a mother who is holding permanent resident status, right? And by virtue of Article 14(1) as well, the child is automatically considered as a national of the country. So this is an ex lege or automatic conferment of nationality to foundlings, right? And second provision is Section Article 15A of our federal constitution, and this is based on the discretionary power given to the federal government to actually confer citizenship on any person under the age of 21 years by way of registration under special circumstances as the government thinks fit. However, the notion of special circumstances is not defined, right? So this provision is broad-based provision, and discretion can be, exercised, probably in a way that is consistent with international norms, legal norms, or maybe arbitrarily, right? Another very crucial protection that we have in our federal constitution lies in Article 14.1 read together with Part 2, Section 1E. And this is a very important safety net for a child found otherwise to be stateless. They can go and rely on this section, whereby this section explicitly provides that any child born in the territory who is not born a citizen of any country is considered to be a citizen of Malaysia. So, by plain reading of this section, we don't have to go to Hansard to actually identify the intent of the legislators. We know from this plain reading of this provision, the intent is to actually guard against statelessness, to prevent situations of people from becoming stateless, right? So I would say that these are the three most important provisions, to protect against statelessness in our federal constitution.
Thank you, Dr. Rosiana. So from what we've heard from Dr. Rosiana, we can understand that we do not need to look far afield for protection for people who are stateless in Malaysia. We don't really need to look at the many international conventions to find means in which to grant our people here in Malaysia citizenship, people who are at risk of statelessness. Now we'll ask Malini, from a practical perspective, how these constitutional provisions have actually been used successfully to allow people to actually exercise their citizenship rights that they have by law, when previously they may have been considered stateless without any kind of documentation. Over to you, Malini.
Sure. So I'm going to be sharing on the practicality. I think Dr. Rosiana said it's about Article 15A, and almost every stateless person you have ever met, childhood statelessness particularly, 15A is the key form that enables one to apply for citizenship. And childhood statelessness could mean adopted child who is stateless, a foundling child, abandoned children, and children born out of wedlock to Malaysian fathers. They all only can access 15A form. And this 15A form requires your father, your guardian, which is your adoptive parents, to actually help you to put that application in. And it is the only procedure that's available in JPN for you to place an application, especially in the situation of statelessness. And then you also have 15.2, which is for mothers whose children born overseas. And regardless, they would still have to use that provision to apply, even if they are stateless. That is the only provision for you to apply. Again, both this application cannot be used if you're above 21 years old. Yeah? So there is a cut-off time. And I think in terms of practicality, I like to emphasize on the fact that no child is born into this world knowing that they're stateless, and neither the parents. So the process of placing an application could very well take place only after they're 12 years old, 15 years old, 16 years old, and after, and then you have a deadline, 21. And oftentimes, if you place your application only for one time, it is a standard rejection. Yeah, I've never had, a situation where one places an application one time and just got a citizenship. I've never seen anyone like that. So that's the only provision administratively that's being used, and it's very important for me to emphasize both 15A and 15.2 does not differentiate if you're a stateless and does not prioritize your application if you're a stateless. It's just basically a provision that enables you to apply citizenship by registration if you are impacted by the gender unequal discriminatory law. Yeah, so that's 15A. But speaking of Section 1E, which is the constitutional safeguard on statelessness, it's only been implemented in the courts. It's being used by lawyers to actually protect stateless persons. And I'm not sure if you guys have seen Wong Queng Hui. His case that was in the court was based on Section 1E. He got recognized as a Malaysian based on Section 1E. Apart from that, 19B is for foundling. And what I understand from, I'm not a lawyer, but in 2019 there was a federal court judgment where the CJ basically instructs NRD to implement the federal constitution to protect foundling with automatic citizenship. So that's not been done. Yeah, it's there, it's been instructed, but it has not been implemented. Apart from these three main areas, I'd like to think that having a permanent residency card and being able to pass on citizenship to your children, that itself it's a safeguard to prevent statelessness, especially in situations where we have a situation of Family Frontiers case where when a mother goes overseas cannot pass on citizenship because she gives birth in that country. That can be very well happening in our country, in the sense there is a foreign woman in our country, she gives birth and her child becomes stateless, and imagine if there is no permanent residency for her to pass on citizenship. So it can very well happen as well. So permanent residency is also a prevention safeguard to prevent statelessness.
Thank you very much, Malini. So as we've heard from both Dr. Roziana and Malini, we can hear how there is both legal protection as well as practical protection to people who are at risk of being stateless. So we'll move on now to the next question, which is what would the impact be of the proposed constitutional changes? So perhaps we can start off with Patricia.
Thank you, Rachel. So, I think news is quite a buzz with the whole constitutional amendment, which began first with the amendment to grant Malaysian women equal citizenship rights as men to confer citizenship to their overseas-born children. However, this path has sort of got in a bizarre detour right now. It's a buy one, free 8 constitutional amendment. Seems like it at this point. Rachel said to share about the positive constitutional amendment. So that would be for the mothers to grant us the right to confer citizenship to our overseas-born children, which will bring relief to many mothers, those who are in Malaysia and those who are currently abroad, because as we know, citizenship is the doorway to other rights such as healthcare and education, the right to remain in the country, especially if you're above 21. Without this citizenship, non-citizen children are not allowed to remain in the country long-term after they turn 21 or after their student pass expires. So it will bring relief. It will allow our children to have the freedom, the liberty to study, to pursue what they want, to live a whole and full life in this country, or abroad if they choose not to return back. I would say it is also their right for the child to be able to choose whether they want to remain abroad or to have the freedom and the ability to come back to Malaysia. So that is the positive, right? Whether it is positive when it goes to Parliament to be tabled, that's another question, because if it's being tabled together in a package or a bundle, then, it's either you take all, you take none, then it will not be a positive amendment. I think there's fear that they will not get the 2/3 vote if we allow the mothers, but we also endanger the rights of stateless children.
Thank you very much, Patricia. So as we've heard from Patricia, there is something that is positive within this bundle of constitutional proposals for a change. But however, there are also provisions that are a cause for concern. And perhaps now we can hear from Joanne on the impact of some of those provisions that are within the bundle of constitutional change that has been proposed that perhaps are a cause for concern, at least from DRA's perspective.
Firstly, that will impact is the group of foundlings and abandoned groups, and this means that the children will no longer be entitled to automatic citizenship. They will need to go through registration. So as we know that the registration process is not guaranteed, they will need to try 1 or 2 times, or maybe more than that, in order to get their citizenship. And for next, we have, it will impact on the group of children born to Malaysian permanent residents. So if they are stateless, they will no longer to access citizenship, and also they will no longer to access citizenship by the operation of laws. It will also create a new class of statelessness. This means that for our generation, like our grandparents, they are holding a red IC, right? So a lot of our parents, they will automatically get blue IC, right? But for now, if we have these amendments, this means that they will need to go through citizenship process. They will not get automatically citizenship like what our parents do. Yeah. So next also, it will also affect the vulnerable and affected individuals. I would say like groups like children born out of wedlock, adopted stateless children, abandoned stateless children, or the indigenous groups that are based in Sabah and Sarawak or some, yeah. And they will no longer be constitutionally protected against statelessness. This means that they will need to go through the registration citizenship process. And also, it will also impact for the stateless child applicants, because there's amendments about it will reduce the age limit from 21 to 18 for the purpose of obtaining citizenship, which means that they will reduce the age. For me, as my personal experience, I think I already mentioned that I was a formerly stateless person. Yes, I was adopted because of my parents. Because I really know that back then we don't have much social media and stuff. We don't have much of guidance on how we can adopt a children in a very proper way, like in official, like they don't have a guide in the late 20s, right? So of course they will go through the wrong process, and then I just got my citizenship last year, which is when I was 23 years old. Yeah, and yeah, if this articles, these amendments proposed to reduce the age limit, which means that I wouldn't get my citizenship at my age of 23, because they reduced to 18. And 18 is not that time that you submit your application at the age of 18, you get the result at the age of 18. It's not, it doesn't work like that. So yeah, this is all the impact that it potentially impact.
Thank you very much, Joanne.
Sorry,
Would you
can
like
I just
to
add one
something?
more? There's
Sure,
one more
go ahead.
regressive amendment, which is Article 26.2 and applied to Article 15.1. It's the lengthening of the period during which foreign wives can be deprived of citizenship, potentially rendering them stateless. So they want to replace the words 2 years after the date of marriage to 2 years after the date of obtaining citizenship. So some of you may or might not know the journey for a foreign wife to obtain citizenship, even though the federal constitution says that they can apply for it 2 years after they are resident in Malaysia, is often interpreted as permanent residence. And the path for a foreign wife to get PR takes at least 5, 6, 8 years. First time, probably a rejection as well. So we're talking about foreign wives. If they manage to arrive at this point, they will be in their 50s and their 60s. And to be able to revoke their citizenship 2 years after obtaining this citizenship could potentially render them stateless, or they are forced to remain in, say, if the marriage turns abusive, they're forced to remain in it, so they will not be rendered stateless because Malaysia does not practice dual citizenship. So she would have to renounce her initial citizenship in order to get Malaysian.
Thank you very much for adding that, Patricia. So as we have heard from all four panelists, we know that we have constitutional safeguards. They are fairly comprehensive. They have assisted many people, protected them from being stateless and assisted them in getting Malaysian citizenship. The current proposed amendments, well, there's one proposed amendment that is very much welcomed, but the rest that are in the bundle are potentially going to render more people at risk of statelessness. A lot of the issues that were discussed by the panel today are also issues that are related to procedural issues. issues that applications are not processed very rapidly, that there is a long waiting time, that perhaps reasons are not very clear as to why an application has been rejected. So we'd now like to go to the last question for the panel for today, which is how would having an ombudsman or oversight be able to increase procedural efficiency in this issue of statelessness? And we'll ask Dr. Ruziana to start us off on that.
All right, thank you for that question. Before I answer that question, I just would like to draw your attention to the fact that many may not know that the safeguards that we have in the federal constitution in terms of applying them, they are not that straightforward, right? It's not been applied by the KDN except with the court's orders through decisions passed by the courts, right? So theoretically they are there, but in order to apply and enforce these safeguards, you have to go to the court. And the applications are already bogged down with procedural difficulties, and we can only imagine how this affects the hard to reach and the hidden populations who may not have the wherewithal of going to the court and resources to have lawyers to seize them, to have this enforced in their favor. Right, so now we are removing all these safeguards and just imagine the limbo they're going to be in. So statelessness is going to be entrenched across multiple generations, right? So procedural safeguards is one of the issues that we always face when we talk about the plight of stateless persons applying for citizenship, in terms of the time frame that the government needs to process. It's in the case of Wong mentioned by Malini, he had waited almost 15 years before going to court and having the declaration that he was a citizen by virtue of 1E, right? We know that it's already in the pipeline that the government is introducing this new investigative body to address maladministration under Ombudsman Malaysia, and the bill was actually due to be tabled in October last year. I don't know what is the progress now, right? So in terms of this oversight, I think it is very much welcome, right? Because we need this especially independent body from the executive with an express power to investigate and render ministries and organizations accountable to Parliament for any error, procedural error, transgression, and also to call out and to question legislation or practices that are unjust, oppressive, or improperly discriminatory. The question that I have is against what standards? Procedural standards seem to be very opaque when it comes to citizenship. So the first step is always to have this outlined clearly, right, and to have legislative, enforcement for it to have this capacity to be enforced in the first place. So you need to have this robustly spelled out in the first place. We do not have these procedural guidelines, right, as to how we would enforce 19B, 1E, 15A. Nobody knows what are the procedures adopted by the NRD. So we need to move forward with this kind of, I think, reform first. Then only we can have this ombudsman in place. And we also need to see what standards are we going to adopt for all these procedural guidelines to be in place, to be introduced.
Thank you very much, Dr. Roziana. So as Dr. Rosiana has just told us, we need to have perhaps procedural guidelines as well as an independent oversight body, perhaps in the form of an ombudsman. Would any of the panelists like to comment on that, on the need for procedural oversight as well as having procedural standards in place?
Sure. I was just reflecting the challenge that I've had maybe for the last 7 years. What's really interesting in the process of KDN and JPN is even the paralegals that DRA have, we cannot rely on JPN printed guidelines. That's number one rule. The way they handle different cases with different circumstances, that itself has a different storyline. So back in 2014, when DRA went on to address the pre-independence context of statelessness, which was very heavily supported by UNHCR, we had to go door to door to identify people who were stateless, and we had to study the pattern of their application, approval, and then we found out, oh wait, there is a altogether different way of discrimination pattern that's arising at different point, yeah? And we could only find out how these internal procedures were working based on questions raised by paralegal for different cases. That's where we picked up those evidences, and that's where we learned to question the system. That's when we had this evidence, okay, we have this number of statistics of people who are stateless and yada yada. And while I was not very heavily involved then, you know, the gung-ho-ness in me, right? When I took on childhood statelessness, I was like, you know what, I'm just gonna make this as a national issue and I'll fight on and I'll get this through. But only to realize that I'm still, you know, shocked every now and then when an officer actually sends a unrecorded courier to my office wanting me to spill the beans about it, because JPN has another internal procedure that was never informed to people. I found out, I can cite this particular internal circular that came about to my attention. So for marriage registration to happen, you must have at least a minimum of a green IC to enable a marriage registration between a Malaysian and a stateless person, okay? And I've been for the longest time telling that, you know, this childhood statelessness categories, they are going to get married. They are already at that age. I mean, Joanne is here. Joanne is about 23-ish. 2 years or 3 years down, she might consider getting married, and imagine a lot of them are still stateless. What would happen to their children? Because you would not allow them to register their marriage. And you would so easily classify these children as children born out of wedlock, just because they didn't have a legal marriage. But it's the situation where you do not allow them to register the marriage. And I was so shaken when I got the circular that state, that came out in March 2019, that says that actually in accordance to the Marriage Act, there is no minimum required document to register marriage. Therefore, we don't see a problem allowing an adopted child with birth certificate or a birth certificate with belum ditentukan status to legally register the marriage. And I sat there, I was like, oh my God, we resolved this. I hope, you know, the rest of the states would implement and know about this and stuff like that. Then a week later, I took out the letter and I was like reading through the lines and I realized they excluded children born out of wedlock. They only allowed children who were adopted to legally register the marriage if you're still stateless, or children with belum ditentukan status, which is usually when the mother is refusing to come forward to register the child, so they issue such kind of birth certificate. And I was like, oh, children born out of wedlock is the largest population of statelessness, and you don't want to address that, and you left them out of this circular. And this specific circular were not shared to any one of us. And I also wanted to point out that I'm not sure how the ombudsman process is going to be helpful. I mean, it's great to lodge a complaint, but when the system is not transparent at issuing the rightful citizenship, I don't know where we would get with the ombudsman process. I don't know. Because I know for sure that, you know, the whole of JPN and KDN is very complex. There's so many hidden. If someone asks me, what do you think about making the government give reason for rejection? And I'd be like, that's basically you asking them to tell all the wrongs that they have done in the past and, you know, put them into that, you know, dig the grave for them to get in. Because, how else? Because there was never a reasoning of how the citizenship was issued, because that's how much power is vested on there. So I think this needs to be addressed. This needs to be addressed, and I think people don't, Joanne tried to pull this up, citizenship by operation of law, and also occasionally some use automatic citizenship. I don't think so people know the difference between citizenship by operation of law / automatic versus citizenship by registration. And citizenship by registration, there's so much a process in there. So yes, I think that's where the details of the internal circulars is going to come in, and none of us would ever know this, and that's where the problem is.
Thank you very much, Malini. So we've heard from Dr. Rosiana and Malini on the procedural complexities surrounding the issue of statelessness, the need to have perhaps better and clearer procedures that are known to all, and perhaps the need for an ombudsman or an oversight body that is independent to oversee the compliance to these procedural elements, so that citizenship applications for people who are at risk of statelessness happen in a timely manner and happen with the giving of reasons for every rejection. And so we have come to the end of the panel discussion from side panelists, and we would like to open the floor now for questions that can be directed then to the panelists. Right, yes.
And before that, if you would like to speak, the mics are actually right in front of you. There's this round button. You can just tap it up and it is the mic. Thank you.
Thank you, Zai. And so it's red now, so when you tap it, it becomes green. So, right.
Just like to comment that the procedures and the systems that's currently in place, they do not at all look at the interest of the best interests of the child. So I think there needs to be more effort put in there, because once everybody has got that mindset, thinking in the best interest of the child, then it will hopefully smoothen out all the other details in the whole procedure. What's the take of the panelists on this?
Dr. Rosiana, would you like to?
I really agree with that observation, right? So Article 3 of the CRC is something that we have ratified and accepted, but we rarely talk about this when it comes to citizenship. Some court cases have actually invoked Article 3, in giving justifications for allowing citizenship on the basis of 1E and other safeguards. In terms of the procedures, as you said, this is something that we need to look seriously into. The government needs to realize that we are actually bound to implement Article 3 seriously in all actions and decisions concerning children. And we have to call out when it is not done, and clearly advocate and agitate for this as well.
Thank you, Dr. Rosiana.
I have a question here. Okay. Actually, it is also with regard to the stateless children's education right. In our Malaysian law, that we allow the children to have at least 9 years of education. However, what we call the amendment in 2002, which disallowed the foreigner to attend the government school. So, in a situation like my experience of setting up the community learning center for the migrant children, they were born here. They do not have any identity. They are stateless. So, immigration raped my center, and then all my 36 children was put into detention camp. Yeah. So the question is actually like when there's a contradiction of the Child Right Convention, education's what we call policy, and then now come the immigration policy. If the children is born here, how could you consider them as an illegal entry migrant? And then the other part is actually, yes, you can go to school, then you must have the student pass. Then you go to immigration, based on what you can apply for the student pass, you cannot go to school. So in this particular situation, as what we call as an actor to provide education to them, we cannot allow these children to come to study in a place because we will be violating the Immigration Act 56 for illegal harboring. So I wonder in what way we can at least look into this particular matter and to find out with the amicable solution to this. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Would you like to comment, Malini?
So I'm not sure about the context of migrant stateless that you're talking about, but currently the procedure stands as that if you're a stateless person and have a Malaysian parent involved in that process, which means your birth certificate says that you're a Malaysian father and your child is stateless, then you could access public school, but you have to pay levy fees, which is 120 ringgit for primary education and secondary is 240. And increasingly, we have universities who are accepting these children without a citizenship. So that's the process for, I would say, in situ statelessness. But if you're speaking about migrants, yeah.
Actually, I adopted one kid of one out of wedlock.
Say again?
I have adopted one kid out of wedlock, stateless, because and then he couldn't go to the government's university at all.
They should be able to. There is a pink form that you must fill up.
No, actually no. I'm stating particularly University Malaysia Pahang.
Okay, so public university, right? So as I mentioned, tertiary is only with private universities. We have not been able to do it with public schools. Tertiary has always been the private university colleges who have accepted and allowed them to complete their education based on the birth certificate number and ongoing citizenship application. Yeah.
Thank you very much, Malini. Move on to the next question.
Is this picking up my voice? Okay. I'm not sure whether the government has communicated this to the panelists, but I'm just wondering what are the reasons for such strict controls over registration and acknowledging stateless children as citizens? Is it just bureaucratic inertia? Is it political? Is it about managing the ethnic composition of Malaysia? So I'm just wondering what would be the hunch of the panelists.
Thank you very much for that question. Would you like to take it, Patricia?
Control of who gets citizenship. I think referring to what was said earlier about the best interest of children, our Deputy Home Minister, the previous one, has described children, non-citizen children, particularly those born abroad to Malaysian mothers, as a threat to national security. So those are kind of narratives that are being used, thrown around carelessly, branding children as a threat to national security because they might have the citizenship, foreign citizenship. And so it's seen as a threat to security, to borders, the whole idea of being protectivist, I think also is in line together with, the complexities of race and religion in our country, as well as socioeconomic factors, history, etc. So I mean, that's a vague take on that.
Thank you very much for that response, Patricia. I think when we think of these kind of issues as to the why, why this sort of control, perhaps it's useful also to see it from a nation's perspective. The need to have control gives a nation that sense of sovereignty, the ability to decide. The question then comes, what happens when that control that a nation rightfully exercises within its borders then infringes on the rights of individuals to actually have nationality? And so there is that continuous tension between national sovereignty, which every nation would like to rightfully exercise within its borders, and the issue of protecting rights, especially the rights of a child, in that context. And so that's why we kind of are here today, to discuss this very difficult issue and how to resolve this tension in a way that brings justice within the borders. Dr. Roxana, would you like to add?
completely agree. Like the fact that reserve Article 7, which is central to acknowledging the right to legal identity, also alludes to the fact that we want control over who gets legal identity, right? From our national framework perspective. It also baffles me to think about what is the real motivation behind restricting access to citizenship for certain categories of children who are homegrown stateless, born on our soil, like foundlings, and also unmarital children, children born out of wedlock, to at least one citizen father. So if you've read decisions of the courts, the senior federal councils will find numerous reasons to actually deny, find arguments to deny that they are not supposed to deny that they should get citizenship, right? So it's a very restrictive interpretation, very technical. We can opt for liberal interpretations which are protective of their human rights and best interests, but that's not the pathway that our some of those in the judiciary have opted for. Yeah, it really baffles me because we are adopting jus sanguinis and also jus soli restrictive in some ways, but it's really our conscience to actually use these provisions and principles if we want to actually protect these children against a multitude of human rights deprivations. So it's really counterintuitive when we think about the slogan of the Madani government, seeing what is happening now. I get teary-eyed sometimes talking about this. I'm just so sorry.
Okay, so thank you very much to everyone here today for being here for our panel discussion as well as the Q&A session. We'd have liked to take more questions, but unfortunately time does not permit, and we have a movie ahead, so we are all really excited about that. And so I would like to thank once again, and let's put our hands together for our esteemed panel and the great discussion. Okay, thank you very much. All right, so I'll pass the floor now back to Zai.
So everyone, you heard about the proposed amendment. So we just came up with the change.org campaign to sign it. So please help us to sign this. And this is going to be tabled sometime in March. So please spread it as much as you can. We want to do our best to stop the amendments to be bundled together. Yeah, thank you.
Thank you very much. And I'll pass the time now back to Zai, and we'll invite our panelists to take a seat. Thank you.
All right. So thank you very much to our esteemed panelists and Rachel for the excellent panel. And I think I hope that everyone has learned something today. And I think to keep in mind, right, as we will have, the next half of our day later. So now we are coming to an end to our session today. So to close, I would like to invite Dato' Melati to come and provide us with some of her thoughts and a closing remarks.
Thank you, Zai. Associate Professor Dr. Melati, panelists, guests, and everyone present. First of all, I would like to thank you and extend my appreciation to Asia School of Business and SUHAKAM for jointly organizing today's lecture on statelessness. I would also like to record my thanks to Yang Berhormat Ram Kapal for being here with us this morning and delivering the keynote address. Yeah. Thank you too to the remarkable panelists for their excellent thought-provoking deliberations which we just witnessed a while ago. We have already heard very comprehensive presentations. I'll come here. All right. Okay, thank you. Yeah. All right. Yes, we have already heard very comprehensive presentations on issues of concerns regarding statelessness raised by Dr. Melati and the panelists. Now, as a SUHAKAM Commissioner, I would like to share with you some of SUHAKAM's works, and of course our views and stand, particularly on the recently proposed amendments to the Federal Constitution involving issues of statelessness. Since its establishment in 1999, SUHAKAM has been advocating for the plight of stateless persons. In accordance with its mandate and functions, besides organizing activities such as seminars, forums, engagements with various stakeholders, SUHAKAM has also been receiving and handling complaints relating to statelessness. In 2022, SUHAKAM has received 138 complaints involving statelessness issues. SUHAKAM also holds watching briefs in cases involving citizenship, and so far, 9 watching briefs have been held. For example, watching briefs for the cases of Nalvin De Leon, Suryani Kempe, and Liu Xin Mei. In 2021, SUHAKAM embarked on a research project on human rights and statelessness in Peninsular Malaysia by appointing Dr. Melati as the research consultant. And on behalf of SUHAKAM, I would like to extend our special thanks to Dr. Melati for successfully completing the report within its tight schedule. Not only focusing on statelessness issues in Peninsular Malaysia, SUHAKAM also conducted activities, programs on stateless matters, particularly in Sabah. Anyone from Sabah here? Oh, great. I'm a commissioner from Sabah, yes, so we all know the problems plaguing the state of Sabah. In 2023, last year, a memorandum of understanding on finding durable solutions to the statelessness issues in Sabah was signed between SUHAKAM, Indonesia's National Commission of Human Rights, Komnas HAM, and the Commission of Human Rights of the Philippines. This MOU will span a period of 5 years from 2023 to 2028. And as you may be aware, the Office of the Children's Commissioner, since its establishment in 2019, has made the issue of statelessness as one of the primary agenda among many children-related issues. Recognizing that in order to break the generational circle of statelessness, it needs to start from children. Therefore, OCC has been vigorously advocating for the rights of stateless children with the aim of reducing the number of stateless individuals. Recently, in November 2023, the policy brief on the right to education for refugee stateless children was launched. The policy brief will be the main advocacy tool in the pursuit of right to education for all children, regardless of their status. This is what we have been told, and we will hold the government to this promise, right? Okay. SUHAKAM welcomes the government's efforts to propose amendments to the Federal Constitution on matters relating to citizenship. SUHAKAM commends the proposed progressive amendments to the entire Part 3 of the Federal Constitution, together with the first schedule and the second schedule of the Federal Constitution covering the issue of children's citizenship, who were born abroad to Malaysian mothers, of which will give effect to the constitutionally guaranteed right to equality under Section 8 of the Constitution. Applications on clear-cut cases of children born abroad to Malaysian mothers should be processed accordingly to ensure that Malaysian women can enjoy equal rights in relation to nationality and citizenship of their children. However, that being said, SUHAKAM has serious concerns on the government's proposal to amend several citizenship provisions under Part 2 of the second schedule of the Federal Constitution, purportedly to prevent the misuse of acquiring Malaysian citizenship. To date, SUHAKAM has not been provided with any data or information of such abuse or misuse in the applications. SUHAKAM is of the view that regressive amendments perpetuate childhood statelessness and encompass a range of complex and sensitive scenarios, demand a more deliberate approach. SUHAKAM is also of the view that amendments to the Federal Constitution must be premised on a humane approach to enhance clarity and streamline the process of citizenship applications. Suhakam wishes to emphasize that the proposed amendments, particularly the proposal to abrogate Section 19B in Part 3 of the second schedule, should adversely affect foundlings who are in dire need of protection from the state. You have heard this from the panelists just now. These changes risk deepening the challenges faced by generational stateless individuals in Malaysia. These proposed amendments would then create generational issues of statelessness, further burdening the state with such people unable to fend for themselves and unable to be productive and contribute to the nation. Therefore, moving forward, Suhakam strongly feels that there is a need for the government to adopt a holistic and considerate approach in addressing these citizenship issues. It is crucial that the proposed citizenship amendments undergo thorough examination and revision to ensure alignment with human rights values, reflecting the government's commitment to principles of justice and equality. Each amendment needs to be carefully considered for its unique implications to ensure that the fundamental rights of all individuals are upheld. Finally, I would like to emphasize that nationality is fundamental to human rights and is guaranteed under the Universal Declaration of Human Rights. Being a recognized citizen of a country has many legal benefits and allow access to other basic rights, such as education and healthcare. I think these are the major constraints faced by the stateless people, education and healthcare. Guaranteeing each person has a nationality extends beyond providing legal identity. It safeguards their future and enables them to have experience to having a healthy, educated, and fulfilled life. In short, it is the password to survival. Last but not least, before we all head out to watch the acclaimed Malaysian movie, Abang Adik, which has garnered international awards, I would like to once again thank everyone for attending our event today. Breaking away from your busy day can be challenging, and we do not take it for granted. We are grateful that you are present here today and spending time with us, and I hope to see you again in the near future. Thank you very much.
All right, so thank you, Dr. Melati, for the closing remarks. So we have come to an end to our session today. So thank you again, once again, everyone, for joining us today in this to listen and to discuss about this important topic, and to echo what Dr. Melati said. It is challenging to bring folks out of your work day to actually listen to us. But hopefully this session will have brought some thoughts and I think reflections, right, on the state of where we are. I think, and also I would love to also thank Suhakam, right, for supporting us in this journey and also hosting this lecture series. And hopefully we will have more of this to come. Now, before we end, we should have all our feedback forms here. So if you'd like to please do provide us feedback for us to improve, right, for our events. And also do follow us. We are on Instagram, LinkedIn, Facebook, and Twitter. Yeah. The only thing we don't have is TikTok, but here you go. So please do follow us, and you will get more updates of our future events and so on. Now, to end this, before we go out, as we know, 3 o'clock, we do have our screening at New Central, GSC, level 5. To obtain the tickets, right, as you leave the room, please do go back to the registration table to claim your tickets. The tickets may say a seat number, but we pretty much want to make it a free sitting. So yeah, so that will be how it will be. Please be there, and I mentioned in the morning, please be there by 2:45, seated, because this is special screening, so there's no advertisement, nothing like that, so don't come like 3:30 and imagine that things just started. No, so things start at 3 o'clock, sharp. So please be there, right? And after that, about 5 o'clock, we'll be joined by the director, Jin Ong, who will be joining us, and we will have a half an hour conversation with him, yeah? So, and finally, if you might see some of the bags that you have with you, right? If you have not gotten a bag from there, we do have more at the registration table too. All right, so thank you very much again, once again, and hope to see you all later.